For more than a century, Saturday Night has been an institution in the Canadian magazine business. In recent years, the magazine has drawn its share of controversy under its outspoken owner, Conrad Black. So when editor Ken White moved to Black's newspaper, the National Post, all eyes were on his successor, 31-year-old Paul Tough. Paul who? Well, he's a Canadian who for the last 10 years was with Harper's Magazine in the United States. Tonight on Gregg and Company, contributing editor Allan Gregg in conversation with Paul Tough.
Even within the literary community, you're hardly a household name. And you spent the last 10 years, virtually your entire adult life, in the United States, principally working for Harper's Magazine. Why do you think you got the job as editor of Saturday Night?
Well, I think because I had the sort of editorial ideas that that Conrad Black and the other people who were looking for a new editor valued. What I talked about when I was interviewing for the job was wanting to make Saturday Night, even more than it already was, into a magazine of stories, of interesting stories from all across the country. And I think that my experience at Harper's and on the radio suggested that I had some ideas about how to do that.
Now, you learnt on the knee of Harper's editor Lewis Lapham,
yes,
known as a rock-rib liberal, and you're coming to a magazine that's been shrouded in a certain amount of controversy with the ownership of Conrad Black, known for his strong neoconservative views. Was that a leap for you?
Well, I think actually the two of them have more in common than it might appear. I mean, I don't see Saturday Night now certainly as an ideological magazine. I'm certainly interested in us continuing to cover politics, but not from one partisan point of view or another. But I think what's common between Lewis Lapham's ideas and Conrad Black's ideas is that they're both tend to be skeptical about received wisdom and the way that governments and power structures work, that they look around for new ideas and new ways of looking at things. So I think there's actually more of a comfortable fit than it might appear.
Now, when we had Conrad Black on the show to allegations of editorial interference, he says, no, it's unnecessary. He says, what I do is, he says, I pick people who are more or less like-minded to run my periodicals, and therefore there's, in publications, therefore there's no need. What are your political views? Do you have strong political views?
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, I don't have strong partisan political views. I'm coming back to Canada after 10 years away to a political landscape that's a lot different than the one I left. New parties are here. All the parties that I'm used to have all sort of changed their stripes in one way or another.
And their fortunes.
Exactly. So so I don't feel that I do have a strong party affiliation or partisan affiliation.
Are you like-minded with Conrad Black in any way?
I think in the same sort of ways that I'm like-minded with Lewis Lapham. That that I think that there's something about the political system here, as with the political system in the United States, that is sort of hidebound, that feels stuck in some way in a lot of old ideas, old divisions. And so I'm very interested in new ways of looking at those questions. Just as I was at Harper's.
Now, the magazine has gone through some significant changes since the days of Bob Fulford and John Fraser. Do you have any grand vision for the magazine in terms of where you want to take it?
Well, I think a lot of my grand vision is expressed in this redesign, in this new issue, the March issue. And yes, I think. I mean, to my mind, it's not that different than the way that Fulford and Fraser and editors in the past have made it. In fact, as we were working on this redesign, I and the other editors spent a lot of time looking back at even older copies of Saturday Night to sort of get a sense of it.
The logo was 30-ish, 40.
Yes, exactly. It's based partly on an old logo. So all the sort of big ideas that I came with, wanting to make it a magazine more than ever about Canada, about all of Canada, looking for new and different and well-told stories of politics and people's lives from across the country. I came sort of thinking that those were brand new ideas, and then looking at through old issues of Saturday Night, one of the sort of chastening but also reassuring things was that that's exactly what Saturday Night has been doing throughout its history.
You have made some specific changes, though.
That's true. Mostly the changes that I've made are bringing in new editorial forms. One of the things that I found working in magazines in the United States, not just for Harper's, but also as a freelance writer and editor for other magazines, was that the forms that they had and that magazines here had as well for telling stories, for getting ideas across, felt a little out of date. I mean, the feature articles certainly still work, memoirs still work, short stories still work. But I felt that there were some new forms that I wanted to try, and this issue introduces some of them. Canadian letters is
yeah, I was particularly interested in that, and I understand you want to write Canadian letters from different parts of the country.
Yes.
Wow. What's your thinking there?
Well, sort of two things. From a selfish point of view, it gives me a chance to travel around the country and sort of see into different lives, different regions, different places, and I think that'll help me as an editor, and especially as an editor of Saturday Night, to understand what's going on around the country. But I also think that it's important for the editor to have a voice in the magazine. But my voice, as opposed to the voice of editors past, I'm not as comfortable being a pundit or giving my...
Doing an editorial page.
Exactly. What I'm much more interested in, my background as a writer is much more as a reporter, and as a reporter where I'm more interested in letting the people I'm interviewing tell their stories and sort of give my slant on it. Yeah. So the Canadian letter section seemed like a good place.
Now, if you go to a newsstand, I mean, within the parlance of the trade, you see tons of vertical magazines, you know, the left-handed sailor, the midget gardener. I mean, everything is niche. Everything is niche. Saturday Night has been obdurately a general interest magazine throughout history and today. I mean, do you ever feel that you're kind of, you know, running against an unstoppable trend, that the appetite for general interest is just gone?
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's one of the reasons that I felt so lucky to be given this opportunity, because that is the sort of magazine that I like and that speaks to me. I love reading those really very specific magazines. I just picked up the first issue of a new magazine about alternative golf, about punk rock golf. I just loved. But I mean, a magazine that really speaks to me is going to be a magazine that looks at me as sort of the complicated reader that I am, with a lot of different sorts of interests, different sorts of ways that I want to get information. And I really believe, and especially in Canada, that there is a place for that kind of writing and that kind of reading, that kind of magazine. It's one of the things that I think the United States has lost, that 30, 40 years ago, there were these magazines in the United States like Life and the Saturday Evening Post that were these really broad-based, cross-country, across different age groups and incomes and subgroups that could speak to the whole country, just like the three big networks used to be able to. And the fracturing that's happened there, much more so than has happened here, I think has really undermined the fabric of the country. So the fact that we have a magazine that can kind of speak to us not in a homogenizing way, not saying, well, you're Canadians and so you're all alike and this is who you are and so here's your magazine. It can sort of say, of course, all Canadians are different. They all have these different experiences, but there's something interesting, something to be gained by reading about what those lives are like all across the country.
Under your predecessor, Ken White, the magazine almost seemed to court controversy, as a reputation of as an icon blaster. I mean, we see Farley Mowat with a big Pinocchio nose, Craig Kielburger being knocked off his soapbox. Is the magazine going to be softer, a little bit more low-key under your leadership?
Well, I think you can do both. I mean, I think those pieces were thoughtful as well. But I mean, if you look at our cover story in February by Naomi Klein about what she found to be sort of the hidden story of the APEC controversy, which was that actually the way that Canada exists in the world economy is much different than what we thought. That really the reason that we got pushed around by Indonesia to that extent is because we're seen by the world as a resource-based economy. We tell ourselves, and we want to believe that we're this very high-tech, modern Western economy. But in a lot of ways, we're you know, providing logs and fish and wheat to the rest of the world. So to me, that is a controversial idea. That really goes at the heart of a lot of what Canadians think about themselves. But it's thoughtful at the same time.
Now, the cover story of your very first magazine that's fully under your tutelage is an investigation of the West Edmonton Mall by an American writer, Jack Hitt, an American writer. Now, are you sending us a message here?
No, just that what's important to me in terms of making it a Canadian magazine isn't necessarily to have only Canadian writers writing for us, but is to focus exclusively or almost exclusively on Canadian stories. I think there's a great tradition in this country as well as in the United States and in Britain of having visitors to the country give you their impressions about it and give you sort of a fresh perspective on what life's like there. Jack, from his experience as an adventure writer going off mostly in the United States on various strange adventures, seemed like the perfect person to send to trap inside mall for 7 days. So I think there's something to be gained from that perspective.
Now, we've seen a huge hue and cry about split-run magazines, foreign magazines that are dominantly foreign editorial content with some modest Canadian sections that take in Canadian advertising, and that the government has Bill C-55 saying no more. Is split-run magazines a threat to Saturday night?
Well, it's complicated, and to be honest, I'm not sure of what all the ramifications of it are, partly from having just got back in sort of the middle of this debate. But I think that one of the things that it pushes me towards, and I've sort of been pushed this way already, is thinking about Saturday Night as a Canadian magazine. And I think that there's a way in which Saturday Night doesn't really have any American competition. I mean, I think our readers tend to read a lot of American magazines and want that perspective on the United States and on the world. But there's something that Saturday Night gives them that they can't get anywhere else, which is stories about Canada.
Have you been immersed into the politics of the magazine industry in terms of, you know, being, okay, so there's no threat to Saturday Night, but come on, you're part of the team. You know, get in here. This is a huge threat to the magazine industry, isn't it?
It's something that I've certainly heard, and it's one of the facts of having sort of spent the last 6 months with my head down working on this issue and this redesign.
For good reason.
That I've missed some of that, but I think it's out there.
Now, for many people, it's more than a magazine. I mean, it's 100 years old. It's an institution. It has been, for decades and decades, the vehicle of choice for Canada's greatest writers. I mean, W.O. Mitchell has been in there, Morley Callahan. Do you feel a responsibility for the next generation of writers? Do you feel a responsibility to maintain that tradition? I mean, do you have a sense of weight and historical proportion on assuming this job?
I think I do, yes, although I tend to think of the responsibility as being much more to the readers than to anyone else. But I think it ends up in the same place. I think that I want to give our readers now the sort of stories that they want to read. But I think that the sort of stories they want to read are not that different than the sort of stories that Saturday Night readers 20, 50, 100 years ago wanted to read about Canada. So I think there's a way to make the magazine very contemporary, very new, and still be very true to the Saturday Night tradition.
Paul Tough, I want to thank you very much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.